There's a certain type of trust you expect during childbirth, a sacred understanding that while you're bringing new life into the world, everything else in your life remains secure. It's the one moment when you should be able to focus entirely on the miracle happening before you, knowing your partner is holding everything else together. That's how I felt as I lay in the hospital bed, counting contractions and breathing through the pain that would eventually bring my daughter into the world. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a text from Garret. The screen preview showed just enough to change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sold the house. You'll understand why. I stared at those words, my next contraction momentarily forgotten, as the world I thought I knew crumbled around me. The day had started normally despite being my due date. Garret had kissed me goodbye that morning, his hand lingering on my swollen belly. "Call me the second anything happens," he'd said, his eyes crinkling with what I thought was excitement. "I'll drop everything and be there." Our home, the historic Victorian we'd spent 3 years renovating, felt especially peaceful that morning. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass window in the nursery, casting colorful patterns across the crib we'd assembled together. The house had been our passion project, something we'd poured our savings and souls into. My mother Maureen arrived around noon, bringing homemade soup and fresh bread. As we ate, I confided, "He's been acting strange lately." "Who, Garret?" My mother looked concerned. "Just distant. Probably nerves about becoming a dad. Men get weird before babies arrive," Maureen said confidently. "Your father disappeared into his workshop for days before you were born." I laughed, pushing away the nagging feeling that had been growing over the past weeks. The late-night phone calls Garret took in the hallway, the paperwork I'd glimpsed him shoving into his desk drawer, the sudden business dinners that left him unreachable for hours. I'd attributed it all to work stress or baby preparation, but now, looking back, I wonder how I missed the signs. My first real contraction interrupted our conversation. Not the Braxton Hicks I'd been experiencing for weeks, but something deeper, more purposeful. "I think," I said once it passed, "you should drive me to the hospital." Everything moved quickly after that. My mother helped me to the car while I texted Garret. "It's happening, heading to hospital now." 3 dots appeared immediately, then his reply, "On my way." By the time we reached the hospital, the contractions were coming every 7 minutes. Dr. Hannah, my OB/GYN, arrived shortly after, her calm presence immediately reassuring. 4 centimeters already," she said after examining me. "Your body knows what it's doing, Margaret. This baby might come, faster than we thought." I nodded, then grimaced through another contraction. "Has my husband arrived? Garret Mitchell?" A nurse checked the visitor log. "Not yet, but we'll send him right in when he gets here." 1 hour passed, then 2. My mother held my hand through contractions while continuing to text Garret. His responses were sparse. "Tied up." Then, "On my way soon." Then nothing. By the time I reached 6 centimeters, I was alternating between worry and anger. Where was he? What could possibly be more important than the birth of his child? "Try to stay calm," Dr. Hannah advised, checking the baby's heartbeat. "Stress isn't good for either of you right now." It was during a brief moment of respite between contractions, 7 hours into labor, that my phone buzzed. Maureen picked it up, ready to coordinate with Garret. Then her expression changed. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing something was wrong. It's a text from Garret," she said, her voice strangled. "Read it," I demanded, even as another contraction began building. She hesitated, then held the phone where I could see it. "I sold the house. You'll understand why when I explain everything. I'm sorry to do this now. I can't be there for the birth. Please don't try to contact me for a few days. I'll explain everything soon. The contraction hit full force as I processed his words, my physical pain blending with emotional shock in a way that made me cry out. The monitor started beeping as my heart rate spiked. Dr. Hannah rushed in. What happened? My mother showed her the text, speaking in hushed tones while I gripped the bed rails, trying to anchor myself to something solid as my world spun out of control. Margaret, Dr. Hannah said firmly, taking my hand. I need you to focus on your baby right now. Just your baby. Everything else can wait. But how could I focus? The house, our home, sold without my knowledge or consent. Garret gone, missing the birth of his child. What did it mean? Where had he gone? And most importantly, why? As another contraction gripped me, the questions faded into the background of more immediate concerns. My baby was coming, ready or not, with or without Garret. In that moment, lying in the hospital bed with my mother's worried face beside me, and the steady rhythm of my daughter's heartbeat on the monitor, I made a silent promise to myself and my unborn child. Whatever was happening, whatever Garret had done, we would survive it. We would rebuild. This wouldn't break us. The next few hours passed in a blur of pain, focus, and determination. My body took over, ancient instincts guiding me through the process of bringing my daughter into the world. Dr. Hannah's steady voice anchored me, her instructions clear even through the fog of pain and betrayal. Push, Margaret! One more big push! With a final, primal effort, my daughter entered the world at 11:42 p.m., her angry cry filling the delivery room. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect new life. They placed her on my chest, warm and slippery, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. Not Garret, not the house, not the uncertain future that awaited us outside the hospital walls. Kenna, I whispered. The name Garret and I had chosen together now taking on a new meaning. Kenna Rose. My daughter. Mine. My mother wiped tears from her eyes as she leaned in to see her granddaughter. She's beautiful, Margaret. I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. Beautiful, yes, but also born into chaos she didn't deserve. As the nurses took her for measurements and the standard newborn procedures, the reality of our situation came flooding back. Has he called? I asked my mother, though I already knew the answer from her expression. She shook her head. I've tried, calling him every hour. It goes straight to voicemail. She hesitated, then added, I called Bailey too. Bailey was Garret's sister, the only family he had left after his parents died. We'd grown close over the years, closer than Garret was with her in many ways. What did she say? She hasn't heard from him in days. She's coming to the hospital. I hope that's okay. I nodded, grateful for Bailey's support, but worried about what she might know. Did she have any idea what her brother was planning? Had she seen any warning signs I'd missed? Dr. Hannah finished her post-delivery work and squeezed my hand. You did beautifully, Margaret. Try to rest now. Everything else can wait until morning. But could it? As they wheeled me to the recovery room, my phone clutched in my hand. I couldn't stop myself from trying to piece together what had happened. I scrolled through recent texts from Garret, looking for clues, hints of what was to come. Our conversations had been mostly practical in recent weeks. Discussions about baby preparations, work schedules, grocery lists. Nothing to suggest he was planning to upend our lives. I tried calling him again, my heart pounding as the phone rang. This time, instead of going to voicemail, it was answered. Garret? I said, my voice breaking. There was a pause, then a woman's voice. No, this is Nora. Nora? I didn't know any Nora. Who are you? Where's Garret? Why do you have his phone? Another pause. I think you should ask your husband those questions. Her tone was cold, dismissive. He doesn't want to talk right. Now! The line went dead before I could respond. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at the phone in disbelief, my mind racing. Who was this woman? What was she doing with my husband's phone on the day our daughter was born? The nurse returned with Kenna, now swaddled tightly and wearing a tiny pink cap. "Someone's hungry," she said cheerfully, helping me position the baby for her first feeding. As Kenna latched on, her tiny fist pressed against my chest, I felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. Whatever was happening, whatever Garret had done, this little person depended on me completely. I needed to be strong for her. My mother sat quietly in the corner, her face drawn with worry. "We should call Nate," she finally said. Nate was my older brother, an attorney specializing in real estate law. Under any other circumstances, I might have hesitated to involve him so quickly, to admit that my marriage was potentially unraveling. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Yes," I agreed. "Call him now." While my mother stepped into the hallway. To make the call, I turned my attention back to Kenna, studying her tiny features. She had Garret's nose and my chin. A perfect blend of us both. Created in love, or what I had believed was love. Bailey arrived an hour later, her face pale, with shock. She rushed to my bedside, taking in the sight of Kenna with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Margaret, she's perfect," she whispered. Then, with visible effort, "I'm so sorry about Garret. I had no idea he was planning anything like this." "Do you know who Nora is?" I asked directly. Bailey's expression shifted, confusion mixed with something else. Recognition? "Nora," she repeated. Wait. There was a Nora in college, one of his ex-girlfriends. But that was years ago, before he even met you. An ex-girlfriend. The pieces started shifting in my mind, refusing to form a clear picture. Why would Garret be with an ex-girlfriend on the day his daughter was born? Why would he sell our house without telling me? "He sold the house," I said aloud, the reality of it sinking in fully for the first time. "Our home. Without my consent." Bailey sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. That's not possible. Your name is on the deed, too." "Is it?" I suddenly realized I wasn't certain. Garret had handled most of the paperwork when we bought the Victorian 3 years ago. I'd signed documents, of course, but had I ever actually seen the deed? Had my name been added, or had he kept the property solely in his name? The thought made me feel physically ill. How could I not know something so fundamental about our biggest asset? My mother returned, her expression grim. "Nate's on his way. He's going to stop by the county recorder's office first thing in the morning to check the property records." "And the sale?" I asked. "Can he find out if it actually happened?" "He's going to try. Real estate transactions leave a paper trail." As if summoned by our discussion, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender's name made my heart skip. Lakefront Realty Group. With shaking hands, I opened it. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for choosing Lakefront Realty Group for your recent property sale. This email confirms that the transaction for 1842 Willow Lane has been completed as of today." I couldn't read further. The room seemed to tilt around me as the confirmation of what Garret had done became undeniable. He had actually sold our home, the home where we'd planned to raise our daughter, the home we'd lovingly restored together, on the very day I gave birth to our child. "It's real," I whispered, passing the phone to my mother. "He really did it." As my mother and Bailey read the email, exchanging horrified glances, I looked down at Kenna, now sleeping peacefully in my arms. Born homeless. Born into betrayal. The disruptive event wasn't just a text message anymore. It was confirmed reality, a seismic shift in the foundation of my life that would require every ounce of strength I possessed to overcome. Morning came with the rhythmic sounds of the hospital, the soft beeping of monitors, the squeak of nurses, shoes in the hallway. I had barely slept, drifting in and out of consciousness between Kenna's feedings and my own racing thoughts. My brother Nate arrived early, his normally relaxed demeanor replaced by focused determination. He kissed my forehead, took a moment to admire his new niece, then got straight to business. "I need your permission to act on your behalf," he said, placing a document on the tray table. "This gives me legal authority to investigate the property, sale, and take immediate action if needed." I signed without hesitation, my signature looking shaky and unfamiliar, much like my new reality. "What do we know so far?" I asked, adjusting Kenna in my arms. Nate pulled up a chair, his expression grim. "The house was sold to a company called Horizon Investments. It's a cash sale, completed yesterday. The deed was only in Garrett's name." "But that's impossible," I protested. "I contributed to the down payment. We renovated it together." "Legally, none of that matters," Nate said gently. "If your name isn't on the deed, you have no ownership claim to the property itself." "What about marital property laws?" my mother interjected. "That's where it gets complicated," Nate replied. "Technically, as his wife, Margaret has claim to marital assets, including the proceeds from the sale. But if he's moved that money somewhere, inaccessible." I closed my eyes, trying to process the implications. The home I'd poured my heart into for 3 years wasn't legally mine. The nursery I'd lovingly prepared, all of it gone, sold without my knowledge or consent. "We need to find Garret," I said finally. "This can't just be about the house. Something else is going on." Bailey, who had gone home briefly to shower, returned with coffee. "I've been calling all his friends," she reported. "No one has seen him in days. And his boss said he took unexpected leave last week." "Wait," I interrupted. "He wasn't at work? He left every morning like normal." Bailey and my mother exchanged glances. "Margaret," my mother said gently. "Where did he say he was going?" I tried to think back, to recall our morning routines. Garret kissing me goodbye, briefcase in hand, mentioning meetings and clients. Had I ever actually confirmed he was where he said he would be? I just assumed. I trailed off, the weight of my naivety crushing me. "It's not your fault," Nate said firmly. "You were 9 months pregnant. You trusted your husband." A nurse entered with discharge paperwork. "We'll need your home address for the records," she said. Home address? I didn't have one anymore. "She'll be staying with me," my mother answered smoothly, providing her address. As the nurse left, the reality of my situation hit me fully. In 24 hours, I had become both a mother and homeless, with a husband who had vanished and a house that had been sold out from under me. That evening, an alert appeared on my phone, a bank notification I'd set up years ago. Our joint checking account, which had held our modest savings of just over $15,000, was now empty. Transfer completed at 9:17 a.m., not even $1 left behind. I showed the phone to Nate, who immediately stepped into the hallway to make a call. Bailey covered her mouth in shock, while my mother moved to sit beside me, her arm around my shoulders. "He's taken everything," I whispered, the magnitude of the betrayal expanding with each revelation. Dr. Hannah arrived for a final check before discharge. After examining me and pronouncing both Kenna and me ready to leave, she pulled up a chair. "Margaret," she said gently, "I know something's wrong. Is there anything I can do?" The kindness in her voice nearly broke me. I told her everything: the text during labor, the house sale, the emptied bank account. Dr. Hannah listened, then took my hand. "Document all of this. The timing of his message during your labor, your attempts to reach him, everything. I'll provide medical records showing you were in active labor when he sent that text. What he did wasn't just cruel. It was deliberately timed to catch you at your most vulnerable." As I prepared to leave the hospital, I realized I was departing with more than a newborn daughter. I was leaving with a determination I hadn't known I possessed, a clarity born from the shock of absolute betrayal. Garret had taken our house and our savings. But he had underestimated what he'd left behind. A woman transformed by both birth and betrayal, with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. My mother's house hadn't changed since my childhood. The same floral couch, the same creaky stairs, the same family photos lining the hallway. It had always been a place of comfort and stability. Now, as I settled into my old bedroom with Kenna's portable bassinet beside the twin bed, it felt both like a sanctuary and a step backward. 3 days had passed since we left the hospital. 3 days of unanswered questions, legal consultations, and the strange, disorienting rhythm of new motherhood layered over profound betrayal. Kenna was asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in the peaceful pattern of newborns. I stood at the window, staring out at the maple tree I'd climbed as a child, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost. It wasn't just a house. That realization had been building, crystallizing in quiet moments between feedings and diaper changes. What Garret had taken from me, from us, wasn't merely a structure of wood and stone. It was something far more profound. I closed my eyes, picturing the Victorian as it had been when we first saw it. Peeling paint, sagging porch, windows, clouded with decades of grime. The real estate agent had called it a challenge property, his euphemism for a money pit. But Garret and I had seen beyond the decay to the bones of something beautiful. "We can bring it back to life," he'd said, squeezing my hand as we stood in what would become our bedroom, sunlight filtering through dusty windows, just like my grandparents did with their place. That was what had sealed it for me, the connection to his past, to the grandparents who had raised him after his parents died. He'd told me stories of their old farmhouse, how they'd restored it room by room over decades, how it had taught him the value of patience, of building something to last. I had believed him. More than that, I had built my future around that belief. The sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Quiet voices drifted up the stairs. Nate returning from another day of legal maneuvering. I gave Kenna one more glance, then slipped out of the room to hear the latest news. My brother and mother sat at the kitchen table, their expressions telling me everything before a word was spoken. "He transferred the money to an offshore account," Nate said without preamble. "We can trace it, but recovering it will be difficult." I sank into a chair, oddly numb to this new betrayal. "And the house?" "The sale was legal," he admitted reluctantly. "The deed was solely in his name, but I've filed a claim for your share of the proceeds as marital property." "Do we know who bought it?" I asked. "This Horizon Investments?" Nate hesitated, exchanging a glance with my mother. "It's a shell company," he finally said. "But we've traced its ownership. It belongs to Mario Valenti." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mario Valenti, Garret's college roommate and best man at our wedding. The same Mario who had danced with me at our reception, telling me how lucky Garret was to have found me. "Mario?" I whispered. "But why would he—" "I don't know," Nate admitted. "But it can't be a coincidence." As they continued discussing legal strategies, my mind drifted back to the house, to the weekends spent stripping wallpaper and sanding floors, to the arguments over paint colors and light fixtures that always ended in compromise and laughter, to the garden we'd planted together, the kitchen we'd designed around my love of baking, the nursery we'd prepared with such hope. Each room had held a dream, a fragment of the future we were building. The sunroom where I imagined reading to our children on rainy afternoons. The wraparound porch where we'd planned to watch summer thunderstorms. The basement Garret had converted into a workshop where he promised to teach our kids to build things with their hands. It wasn't just shelter we'd created, but a physical manifestation of our shared vision, a place where our children would grow up, where we'd grow old together, where memories would accumulate in layers like the many coats of paint on its walls. Margaret? My mother's voice broke through my thoughts. Are you listening? I blinked, focusing on her concerned face. Sorry, I was thinking about the house. It's just a house, she said gently. We'll find you another one when this is all sorted out. I shook my head, struggling to articulate what I was feeling. It wasn't just a house, Mom. It was proof. Proof of what? Nate asked. That I could build something lasting, I said quietly. That we could create something beautiful together. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted. It was an act of faith. Faith in us, in our future. I paused, the weight of realization settling over me. And he sold it like it meant nothing. The three of us sat in silence, the magnitude of what had been lost hanging in the air between us. I've been thinking of it as a betrayal of trust, I continued, the words coming slowly as I processed my own feelings. But it's more than that. It's a rejection of everything we built together, everything I thought we valued. My voice caught. It makes me question whether any of it was real for him, whether I was real to him. My mother reached across the table to take my hand. You were real, Margaret. Kenna is real. Whatever was going on in Garrett's head, whatever led him to this. It doesn't erase what you created. I nodded, but the doubt had taken root. If Garret could discard our home so easily, had he ever truly shared my vision of our life together? Had the man I married, the man I thought I knew, ever existed at all? The baby monitor crackled with Kenna's first whimpers of hunger. I rose automatically, my body already attuned to her needs. I should feed her, I said, moving toward the stairs. Margaret, Nate called after me. We're going to fix this, I promise. I turned back, seeing the determination in my brother's eyes, the unwavering support in my mother's face. I know we will, I said. But some things can't be fixed. Some things, once broken, stay broken. As I climbed the stairs to my daughter, I understood with painful clarity that what I had lost wasn't just a house or money or even the husband I thought I knew. I had lost a future, a vision, a narrative of my life that had structured every decision I'd made for years. Now I would have to build something new from the wreckage. Not a house this time, but a life. And I would have to do it alone. 1 week after Kenna's birth, Bailey brought over a box she'd found in Garrett's downtown apartment, a collection of old photographs and journals. I thought you might want these, she said, setting the cardboard box on my mother's kitchen table. They're mostly from before he met you. I stared at the box, unsure if I wanted to open this window into Garrett's past. Kenna slept against my chest, blissfully unaware of the tension in the room. Have you heard from him? I asked. Bailey shook her head. Nothing. It's like he vanished. She hesitated, then added, I tried calling Nora. My head snapped up. The woman who answered his phone? You know her? I remembered her after you mentioned the name. They dated in college for about a year. It was intense. She shifted uncomfortably. I found her on social media and called, but she hung up when I identified myself. Nora, I repeated softly. He mentioned her once, years ago. Said she was his first love. After Bailey left, I sat at the table, Kenna still sleeping against me, and stared at the box. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but the larger part needed answers. With a deep breath, I opened the box. Inside were the artifacts of Garrett's life before me. Photographs spanning his childhood through early adulthood, journals from his late teens and early 20s, concert tickets, postcards, mementos. Among the photographs, I found one that made my heart stop. Garret with his arm around a striking woman with auburn hair and a knowing smile. The inscription read, Nora and me, Montauk, summer 2015. I stared at this woman who had answered my husband's phone while I was giving birth to his child. She was beautiful in a sharp, interesting way. Not conventionally pretty, but magnetic. Setting it aside, I turned to the journals. The early ones contained typical young adult musings, but as I worked forward in time, a pattern emerged that sent chills down my spine. In a journal from 2015, I found the first mention of Nora. Met N today in Morrison's seminar. She challenged everything I said, tore my arguments apart in front of everyone. Should have been humiliating. Instead, I can't stop thinking about her. The entries traced their relationship. Intense, volatile, passionate. Garrett described their connection as transformative. Then, abruptly, the tone changed. N says she needs space. Says I'm suffocating her. Says my plans for the future are too safe, too predictable. How is wanting stability a flaw? My grandparents built their life brick by brick. That's what I want. Something solid, something that lasts. She calls it a cage. The final entry about her was devastating. N left today. Said she can't be with someone whose greatest ambition is comfort and security. Said I'll never understand what it means to truly live, to take risks. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am my grandfather's grandson after all. Solid, dependable, boring. I closed the journal, my mind reeling. The Garrett who wrote these words, heartbroken over a woman who found him too conventional, was the same man who had spent years renovating our Victorian, planning for our future. In a later journal, from just before we met, I found entries that revealed a man questioning his identity. Sometimes I wake up and don't recognize the life I'm building. Is this really me? Or am I just following a script, becoming what my grandparents wanted? And then, the entry that made my blood run cold, dated just 2 weeks before our first meeting. Ran into N today after 3 years. She's just back from Berlin, full of stories about art and music and people living on their own terms. She looked at my life, the job, the condo, the 401k, with something like pity. Is this really what you wanted, G? She asked. I couldn't answer. The pieces fell into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Nora had rejected Garrett for being too conventional. Then he met me, someone who valued exactly what he offered, who saw his reliability as beautiful rather than boring. Was our entire relationship his attempt to prove something to himself? And now, with Nora back in his life, had he rejected that identity completely? Sold our house, the ultimate symbol of stability, to prove he could be the risk-taker she wanted? Was any of it real? I whispered to Kenna. Did he ever truly want the life we were building? Or was I just a character in a story he was telling himself? The warning signs had been there all along, in quiet moments of distance, in conversations that ended abruptly when I spoke of the future, in his occasional wistful remarks about friends who lived less conventional lives. We had both been living in illusions, mine created by love and trust, his by confusion and conflict. The difference was that I had been genuine in mine, while he had been playing a role that, in the end, he couldn't sustain. 2 weeks after Kenna's birth, as I was settling into the exhausting rhythm of newborn care, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. These days, unknown calls usually meant debt collectors or reporters who had somehow gotten wind of our story. But something made me pick up. Margaret. His voice, so familiar yet suddenly strange, made my heart lurch. It's me. Time seemed to stop. For days I had imagined this moment, planned what I would say, how I would remain calm and controlled. Now, with his voice actually in my ear, those carefully rehearsed lines evaporated. Where are you? I managed, my voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Kenna, who had finally fallen asleep after a fussy morning. That's not important right now, Garrett replied. I needed some time to figure things out, to decide what I really want. The casualness of his tone, as if he'd simply taken a weekend retreat rather than abandoned his wife during childbirth and sold our home, ignited something in me. "What you want?" I repeated, incredulous. "You sold our house while I was in labor. You emptied our bank accounts. You missed the birth of your daughter. And you're talking about what you want?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I know how it looks, Margaret, but you have to understand." "No," I cut him off. "I don't have to understand anything. You do. You need to understand that you have legal and financial responsibilities. You need to understand that there's a 2-week-old baby who deserves better than a father who disappears when things get real." "I want to see you," he said abruptly, "to explain in person. I owe you that much." Part of me wanted to refuse, to deny him even this small request, but the larger part needed answers, needed to look him in the eye and understand how the man I had loved could have betrayed me so completely. "When?" I asked, my voice cold. "Today. The coffee shop on Elm Street. 3 o'clock. I thought of Kenna, of the logistics of bringing a newborn to a public place, of the emotional toll this confrontation would take. "Fine, but I'm bringing someone with me." I didn't specify who. Let him wonder, let him worry about facing my brother or some unknown legal representative. "That's fair," he conceded. "I'll see you then." After he hung up, I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. He was back, or at least back in contact. The reality I had been adjusting to, single motherhood, legal battles, rebuilding from scratch, was about to shift again. I called my mother, who was grocery shopping, and explained the situation. "I'll come with you," she said immediately. "I'll be home in 20 minutes. By 3 o'clock, we were seated at a corner table in the coffee shop, Kenna asleep in her carrier between us. I had dressed carefully, not to impress Garret, but to armor myself. The black dress made me look stronger than I felt, and I'd taken extra care with my makeup to hide the exhaustion of new motherhood. When Garret walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, and his usually clean-shaven face sported several days' worth of stubble. But it was more than physical changes. There was something different in his posture, in the way he carried himself, as if he had shed an identity along with our life together. His eyes went immediately to the carrier, to the tiny form of his sleeping daughter. Something flickered across his face. Regret? Longing? I couldn't tell. Then his gaze met mine, and I saw uncertainty replace whatever emotion had been there. "Margaret," he said, sliding into the chair across from us. He nodded at my mother. "Maureen." My mother's usually warm face was set in lines of cold disapproval. She didn't respond to his greeting. "This is your daughter," I said without preamble, turning the carrier slightly so he could see Kenna's face. "Her name is Kenna Rose. She was born at 11:42 p.m. on the day you decided to sell our house and empty our bank accounts." Garret winced, his eyes still on the baby. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "Yes, she is," I agreed. "She deserves better than what you've done." He finally looked up at me, his expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. I know it seems unforgivable." "It doesn't seem unforgivable, Garret. It is unforgivable." My voice remained steady, though I could feel myself trembling inside. "You abandoned us in the most vulnerable moment possible. You took everything we built together and discarded it like trash." "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "Then what was it like?" I demanded. "Explain it to me. Help me understand how the man who held my hand while we picked out nursery colors could text me during labor to say he'd sold our home." Garret glanced around the coffee shop, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation in public. "I panicked," he finally said. "When the reality of fatherhood was staring me in the face, I realized I couldn't do it. Not the way you needed me to." "So you stole from me? That was your solution?" He had the grace to look ashamed. The money, I can explain that. It wasn't— Is it Nora? I interrupted, watching his face closely. The shock in his eyes confirmed my suspicion before he could answer. How did you— She answered your phone, Garret, and I found your old journals. I know who she is. What I don't know is why you would throw away our life together for someone who rejected you years ago. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. It's complicated. Simplify it for me, I said, my tone icy. Garret took a deep breath. Nora came back into my life about 6 months ago. We ran into each other at a conference. She was different, or maybe I was different. We started talking again, just as friends at first. 6 months ago. When I was 3 months pregnant. The timeline made the betrayal even more sickening. She reminded me of the person I used to be. The dreams I had before. He trailed off. Before me. I finished for him. Before our life together. He nodded slowly. I felt like I was living someone else's life, Margaret. Like I had taken a path that wasn't really mine. And our house? Our savings? Were those someone else's too? The house. He sighed. I sold it to Mario because I knew he would treat it right. And the money, most of it is still there. I transferred it to protect it. Protect it from what? My mother interjected, speaking for the first time. Garret. Looked uncomfortable. From impulsive decisions. From myself, I guess. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is access to the account. Everything's there except what I needed for a few weeks' expenses. I stared at the paper but didn't take it. You really think this fixes anything? That you can disappear, throw our life into chaos, then waltz back with a bank account number and expect forgiveness? No, he said quietly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I never intended to leave you destitute. I panicked. I made terrible choices, but I wasn't trying to hurt you financially. Just emotionally, I said, my voice finally breaking. Just by abandoning me during childbirth, by missing the birth of your daughter, by making me question every moment of our life together. Kenna stirred in her carrier, making the small whimpering sounds that preceded full-blown hunger cries. Without thinking, I reached for her, lifting her against my shoulder, soothing her with gentle pats. Garret watched, his expression unreadable. Can I hold her? He asked tentatively. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. This was more than about holding a baby. It was about whether he had any right to be a father after what he had done. No, I said finally. Not today, not until we have a legal agreement in place. I stood, settling Kenna back in her carrier. If you're serious about taking responsibility, you'll meet with Nate tomorrow to discuss child support and division of assets. He nodded slowly. I'll be there. As my mother and I prepared to leave, I turned back to him one last time. You were wrong, you know, about the life we built together not being yours. You chose it, Garret. Every step of the way, every decision we made together, you were there, fully present. If it wasn't really what you wanted, the failure isn't in the life we created. It's in your inability to be honest, with me and with yourself. I walked out without waiting for his response, my daughter secure in my arms, my mother a steady presence beside me. The confrontation hadn't brought the closure I'd hoped for, but it had confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Garret's betrayal wasn't a sudden decision, but the culmination of a lifelong pattern of running from his own conflicts. And for the first time, I understood that his leaving said more about his weaknesses than about my worth. It was a small realization, but in that moment, it felt like the first true step toward healing. The meeting with Garret and our respective attorneys took place in Nate's office downtown. I arrived early, my mother staying home with Kenna to spare, me the added stress. Nate's assistant showed me to the conference room, where my brother was arranging documents in neat stacks. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked. I nodded. I've been preparing for this conversation since I got his text in the delivery room. Garrett arrived with Vanessa Townsend, one of the city's most prominent divorce attorneys. The sight of her confirmed what I had already suspected. This wasn't going to be a simple negotiation. What followed was perhaps the strangest experience of my life. Sitting across from the man I had shared everything with while attorneys coldly itemized our life together. The house, joint accounts, retirement funds, even furniture came under discussion. The only time my composure cracked was when Garrett's attorney suggested a shared custody arrangement. "No," I said firmly. "Not at this stage." "Mr. Mitchell has parental rights," Vanessa pointed out. "Mr. Mitchell abandoned his pregnant wife during labor and has shown no interest in parenting up to this point," I replied. "Any custody arrangement will need to begin with supervised visitation and progress based on demonstrated commitment." To my surprise, Garrett nodded. "That's fair. I'll accept supervised visitation to start." The rest of the meeting proceeded more smoothly. Garrett didn't fight on financial matters, agreeing to child support above the standard calculation and conceding that I deserved a significant portion of the house proceeds. After our attorneys stepped outside, Garrett slid an envelope across the table. "It's a cashier's check for the full amount that was in our joint account. I shouldn't have taken it." I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Why now? Why the sudden attack of conscience? "Seeing you at the coffee shop with Kenna, I realized what I've thrown away." He paused. "I made the worst mistake of my life, Margaret. I know that now." "Is Nora still in the picture?" I asked bluntly. His hesitation told me everything. "It's complicated." "No, it's actually very simple," I said, finally taking the envelope. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Outside the office, I felt a strange lightness. The meeting hadn't erased the betrayal, but it had given me something almost as valuable, a path forward. When I returned to my mother's house, I found her gently rocking Kenna. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "Better than expected. We have a preliminary agreement. As I explained the key points, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. "I'm not going back to my old job," I said suddenly. My mother looked surprised. "What do you mean? Your maternity leave is for 12 weeks. The settlement from the house, plus what I've saved, it's enough to start something new." "Start what?" "My own business. Remember how I always talked about opening a restoration consulting firm? Using my design background and what I learned renovating the Victorian? You always said it was a someday dream." "Well, someday is here," I replied, looking down at Kenna. What Garrett did, it destroyed the life I thought I had. But it also freed me from compromises I didn't even realize I was making. Over the next days, the plan took shape. I reached out to former clients, contractors we had worked with, friends in real estate. The response was overwhelming. Everyone, it seemed, knew someone who needed help bringing an old house back to life. I converted my mother's rarely used dining room into a temporary office, set up a website, and filed the paperwork to establish Mitchell Restoration Consulting. The name was deliberate, a reclaiming of identity, a statement that, despite everything, I was still standing. 1 week after the meeting with Garrett, I received my first client call. A couple who had purchased a century-old farmhouse and were overwhelmed by the renovation. As I scheduled a consultation, balancing Kenna against my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that devastating text message: purpose. 2 months after Kenna's birth, I found myself standing on the porch of the Victorian, our Victorian, for the first time since Garrett's betrayal. Mario Valenti, the new owner, had reached out unexpectedly, asking if I would consult on some restoration issues. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Mario said, opening the door. Thank you for agreeing to this. I nodded, steeling myself as I stepped over the threshold. I'm here as a professional consultant, nothing more. But of course, it was so much more. Every inch of the house held memories, some beautiful, some now painfully tainted. The entryway where Garret had carried me over the threshold after our honeymoon, the living room where we'd planned our future, the kitchen where I'd told him I was pregnant. Mario led me through the house, pointing out issues he'd discovered. Rotting wood on the deck, a persistent leak in the bathroom, uneven settling in the foundation. I took notes mechanically, my professional mask firmly in place even as emotions roiled beneath. "Can I ask you something?" Mario said as we completed the tour. "Why are you doing this? After what Garret did, I wouldn't blame you for telling me to go to hell." I considered the question, looking around at the crown molding I had painstakingly restored, the built-in bookshelves Garret and I had constructed together. "This house was never just Garret's," I said finally. "I put myself into every room, every detail. The fact that my name wasn't on the deed doesn't erase my contribution. I'm here because I refuse to let him take this from me too, my connection to something I helped create, my professional expertise, my ability to see a job through." Mario nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I didn't know what he was doing when I agreed to buy the place. He said you were both moving overseas for work, needed a quick sale. I believed his stories too, I said, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness in my voice. As I prepared to leave, I paused in the nursery, the room we had painted a soft sage green, where the morning light filtered through lace curtains. I had sewn myself. It was empty now, but I could still see it as it had been, filled with hopes for the family we were about to become. "You know," Mario said, joining me in the doorway, "when I bought this house, I planned to live here myself. But now, it doesn't feel right. I'm thinking of selling it." I turned to him, surprised. "Why?" He shrugged. "Too much history, maybe. Or maybe because every time I fix something, I hear your voice talking about authentic restoration and respecting a home's character." He hesitated. "If I do sell, would you be interested in buying it back? Not now, obviously, but when you're on your feet?" The question caught me off guard. Buy back the Victorian. Return to the scene of so much happiness. An ultimate betrayal? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But thank you for asking." Driving away from the Victorian, I felt a strange sense of closure. Seeing the house again had helped me separate the physical space from the emotional devastation Garret had caused. The house, with its solid bones and graceful proportions, wasn't to blame for his betrayal. That evening, after putting Kenna to bed, I sat at the dining room table surrounded by client files. My mother joined me, setting a cup of tea by my elbow. "You've been quiet since you got back from the house," she observed. "Was it too difficult?" I shook my head. "Actually, it was clarifying. Being there reminded me of why I fell in love with restoration work in the first place. Dad told me that old houses have souls," I said softly. "That they remember the lives lived within them, the care given to them." That's what drew me to the Victorian. Not just its beauty, but its resilience. It had survived a century of change, of different owners, of both neglect and love. "Much like someone else I know," my mother said, squeezing my shoulder. That night, watching Kenna sleep, I thought about what I wanted her to learn from this chapter of our lives. Not that trust is foolish or love is dangerous, but that even when the foundation you've built is swept away, you can find the strength to begin again. The values that had guided me before Garret's betrayal: honesty, craftsmanship, the patient work of building something meaningful, remained intact. They hadn't disappeared with the Victorian or with the collapse of my marriage. They were embedded in me, in the work I was now doing, in the way I would raise my daughter. For so long, I had defined myself partially through Garret's eyes. His betrayal had forced me to see myself standing alone, to recognize my own strength, separate from the identity we had constructed together. The true sanctuary I needed to create now was within myself, a foundation so solid that no betrayal, no loss, could ever truly destroy it. 3 months after Kenna's birth, I found myself hosting an impromptu gathering at my mother's house. What had started as a simple coffee with Bailey had expanded to include Hannah, my college roommate, and Gino, a contractor I'd worked with on several restoration projects who had become a trusted friend. Kenna was passed from arms to arms, soaking up the attention with the serene confidence of a baby who knows she is adored. I watched from the kitchen as Bailey held her niece, singing silly songs while Hannah snapped photos, and Gino pretended to be terrified of holding such a tiny human. "You've got quite the support system," my mother observed, helping me arrange a hastily assembled cheese board. "I do," I agreed, surprised by the realization. In the aftermath of Garrett's betrayal, I had felt utterly alone, as if the foundation of my entire life had been swept away. Yet here, in my mother's living room, was tangible proof that I wasn't alone at all. When we joined the others, the conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from Kenna's latest developmental milestones to Gino's current restoration project, a 1920s apartment building downtown in desperate need of updating while preserving its Art Deco details. "You should see the original elevator," he enthused. "Brass cage, manual operation. The owner wants to replace it with something modern, but I've been trying to convince him to restore it instead." "It would be a shame to lose that feature," I agreed. "Have you looked into the tax credits for historical preservation? That might offset the restoration costs." Gino snapped his fingers. "That's exactly what I need, your brain. The owner's coming to the site tomorrow. Any chance you could stop by, talk some sense into him? I can sweeten the deal with lunch at that new place around the corner." I hesitated, glancing at Kenna. "I'd need to bring her along." "Even better," Gino said with a grin. "No one can say no to a face like that." As the evening continued, Bailey pulled me aside, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "I talked to Garret yesterday," she said, after his supervised visit with Kenna. I tensed. The twice-weekly supervised visits had been proceeding without incident, but I still found them emotionally draining, dropping Kenna off with the court-appointed supervisor and picking her up afterward, carefully avoiding direct contact with Garret. "How is he?" I asked, surprised to realize I genuinely wanted to know. "Struggling," Bailey admitted. "He and Nora, things aren't going well. I think reality is setting in about what he threw away." I nodded, unsure how to feel about this information. There was no satisfaction in knowing that Garrett's new life wasn't the romantic adventure he had imagined, just a complicated sadness for the pain that his choices had caused. For him, for me, but most of all, for Kenna. "He asked about you," Bailey continued cautiously, "about how you're doing with the business, with everything." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're rebuilding, stronger than before." She squeezed my arm. "I hope that's okay." "It's fine," I assured her. "I'm not trying to hide anything from him." Later, after everyone had left and Kenna was asleep, Hannah called unexpectedly. "I forgot to tell you something important," she said without preamble. "My company's expanding the Heritage Homes division, and we need a consultant with exactly your expertise. It would be contract work, so you could maintain your own business, but it would give you consistent income while you're building your client base." Hannah worked for Westfield Development, one of the largest real estate firms in the region, specializing in historic properties. The opportunity she was describing could be exactly what I needed to secure my financial independence. "Are you serious?" I asked, hardly daring to believe that such a perfect opportunity could simply fall into my lap. "Completely serious. The interviews are next week. I've already put your name forward." "Hannah, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come in on Tuesday at 10 a.m., she replied pragmatically. and wear that blue dress that makes you look like you could run the company by lunchtime. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet house, overwhelmed by the events of the evening. From Gino's project invitation to Bailey's update about Garret to Hannah's unexpected opportunity, it felt as if the universe was suddenly opening doors I hadn't even known to look for. The next day, I met Gino at the Art Deco building, Kenna strapped to my chest in her carrier. As predicted, her presence softened the owner's initially skeptical attitude toward historical preservation, and by the end of our meeting, he was enthusiastically discussing restoration options for not just the elevator, but the original mail, chutes, and marble lobby as well. Over lunch, Gino asked about my plans for the future. "Are you going to stay at your mom's place? It seems a bit cramped for the long term." I nodded, sipping my iced tea. "I'm looking at apartments, but rentals. In good neighborhoods with enough space for a home office are expensive. What about buying? With the settlement from the Victorian, you must have some capital." I hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of commitment again." Gino studied me thoughtfully. "You know, my sister went through something similar. Not the same, obviously, but her husband left when their son was 2. She was terrified of making any major decisions afterward, afraid of another failure." "What happened?" I asked, recognizing my own fears in his description. "She finally realized that staying frozen was its own kind of failure. She took the risk, bought a little fixer-upper in Oakwood, and it turned out to be the best decision she could have made. Gave her and my nephew stability, a project to focus on, equity." I considered his words. "I think I'm still in the frozen stage," I admitted. "Everything happened so fast. The birth, the betrayal, starting the business. I haven't had time to process it all, let alone think about buying property again." "That's fair," Gino acknowledged. "But don't let what Garret did stop you from creating the life you want. That old Victorian wasn't the only house in the world." His simple statement struck me with unexpected force. That old Victorian wasn't the only house in the world. Of course it wasn't. It was just the one I had poured my heart into, the one that had come to symbolize all my hopes for the future. But there were other houses, other futures, other possibilities I hadn't yet imagined. The interview at Westfield went better than I could have hoped. Hannah had prepared the team, who were already familiar with my work on the Victorian and eager to bring me on board. By the end of the week, I had a contract for 20 hours per month of consulting work, enough to provide a stable foundation for my finances while still leaving time for my private clients and, most importantly, for Kenna. As my professional life began to take shape, I found myself reflecting on the community that had formed around me in the wake of Garrett's betrayal. My mother, whose unwavering support had given me a safe place to land. Nate, whose legal expertise had protected Kenna's future. Bailey, navigating the complex territory between loyalty to her brother and friendship with me. Hannah and Gino, offering opportunities and perspective I might otherwise have missed. They were, collectively, showing me different ways to view my situation, not just as a victim of betrayal, but as a professional with valuable skills, a mother creating a stable future for her child, a woman with options and possibilities stretching before her. One evening, as I sat on my mother's porch watching the sunset, Kenna sleeping against my chest, I realized that what had initially felt like the end of everything had become, improbably, the beginning of something new. The perspectives of those around me had helped shift my own, allowing me to see not just what I had lost, but what I might yet create. 4 months after Kenna's birth, I found myself standing in the driveway of a small craftsman bungalow in the historic district of Oakwood, the same neighborhood Gino had mentioned his sister lived in. The realtor, a brisk woman named Diane, was pointing out features of the exterior, but my attention had already been captured by the house itself. It wasn't grand like the Victorian. There were no stained glass windows or ornate gingerbread trim. Instead, it offered a modest, honest charm, Deep eaves, a welcoming front porch, and classic craftsman details that had withstood nearly a century of changing tastes. "It needs work," Diane was saying, unlocking the front door. "The last owner was an elderly gentleman who lived here for 30 years. Nothing's been updated since the 80s at least." I stepped inside, Kenna asleep in her carrier, and felt an immediate sense of possibility. The rooms were small but well-proportioned, with original hardwood floors hidden beneath worn carpet. A brick fireplace anchored the living room, and built-in bookshelves flanked windows that flooded the space with afternoon light. "The kitchen's a disaster," Diane warned as we continued the tour. "And there's only one bathroom, though there's space to add another if you're willing to reconfigure the second bedroom." I barely heard her, my mind already racing with ideas. Where others might see outdated fixtures and cracked plaster, I saw potential, a blank canvas awaiting transformation. "What do you think?" Diane asked as we completed the tour, standing, once again on the front porch. "I think," I said slowly, "that I need to bring a contractor through before making any decisions. The place has good bones, but I need to know what I'm really looking at in terms of renovations." Diane nodded approvingly. "That's smart. Most people get stars in their eyes and don't think about the practical realities." "I'm not most people," I replied with a small smile. "I've done this before." That evening, I called Gino and asked if he'd be willing to look at the bungalow with me. He agreed enthusiastically, and 2 days later, we met Diane for a second viewing. Gino moved through the house with professional efficiency, checking the foundation, examining the electrical panel, tapping walls to locate load-bearing structures. "The bones are solid," he confirmed, echoing my initial assessment. "You'd need to gut the kitchen and bathroom, update the electrical, probably replace the roof within 5 years. But there's nothing catastrophic." "What about adding a second bathroom?" I asked, bouncing Kenna gently as she began to fuss. Gino nodded, already measuring the space with his eyes. "Definitely doable. You could carve it out of that second bedroom, still leave enough space for a good-sized nursery. Or," he added, glancing at the unfinished attic we had explored earlier, "you could think bigger." "Bigger?" "The attic has great potential. High ceiling, dormer windows. It would make an amazing master suite. Bedroom, bathroom, maybe a small sitting area. You could keep both bedrooms on the main floor intact." I considered the idea, envisioning the light-filled space Gino was describing. "That would be a much bigger project." "It would," he agreed, "but it would also significantly increase the home's value and functionality for the long term." The long term. The phrase resonated in a way I hadn't expected. For months, I had been focused on immediate survival, finding legal protection, securing income, establishing a new routine with Kenna. The idea of planning for years ahead, of creating not just a temporary shelter, but a true home, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As we left the bungalow, I found myself lingering on the front porch, picturing summer evenings spent there, Kenna playing in the small front yard as she grew older. "You're going to make an offer, aren't you?" Gino asked, reading my expression. "I'm thinking about it," I admitted. "It feels right, but also scary. It's a big commitment." "The best things usually are," he replied simply. That night, after putting Kenna to bed, I sat at my desk and created a spreadsheet, methodically analyzing the financial implications of buying the bungalow. The settlement from the Victorian had left me with a decent down payment. My consulting work with Westfield, combined with my growing private client base, provided sufficient income for a modest mortgage. And the property, while needing significant updates, was priced well below market value for the neighborhood. The numbers made sense, yet I hesitated, haunted by memories of another renovation, another house that had captured my heart only to be taken away. What if I poured myself into this bungalow only to lose it too? But as I stared at the spreadsheet, a different perspective began to emerge. The Victorian had been Garrett's house that we had renovated together. This bungalow would be mine from the beginning, chosen by me, financed by me, renovated according to my vision. It would be the first major decision I had made entirely on my own since Kenna's birth, a declaration of independence and confidence in our future. "What do you think, little one?" I whispered, checking on Kenna in her bassinet. "Should we build our own nest?" The next morning, I called Diane and made an offer on the bungalow, contingent on a satisfactory home inspection. 3 days of nervous waiting later, I received word that the offer had been accepted. I would be a homeowner again, not as part of a couple, but as a single mother creating a stable foundation for her daughter. As the closing date approached, I found myself spending evenings sketching floor plans and creating design boards, mapping out the transformation of the bungalow room by room. The work would need to be done in phases, prioritizing essential updates while spreading the cost over time. The vision that emerged was different from what Garret and I had created in the Victorian. Where that renovation had been about restoring historical grandeur, this one would focus on creating a space both practical and nurturing. A home designed around Kenna's needs and my new life as both mother and professional. The kitchen would be the heart of the home, with durable surfaces that could withstand years of family meals and art projects. The main floor would flow with an open concept design, allowing me to keep an eye on Kenna while working. The attic master suite would provide a sanctuary, a space of my own when I needed to recharge. Each decision I made, from the low-maintenance landscaping to the multifunctional furniture, reflected not just aesthetic preferences, but a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in creating a home. Efficiency, sustainability, flexibility, joy. The more I planned, the more I realized that this renovation wasn't just about fixing up a house, it was about reconstructing my own life, rebuilding it according to new blueprints that reflected who I had become in the aftermath of betrayal. I was no longer the woman who had poured her dreams into the Victorian, believing that a beautiful home could secure a beautiful future. I was someone more practical now, more resilient, who understood that true security came not from physical structures, but from inner strength and supportive community. Yet I wasn't cynical either. The bungalow represented not a retreat from hope, but a different kind of hope. More grounded, more independent, built on a foundation of self-reliance rather than shared dreams. The week before closing, I received an unexpected call from Mario. "Valenti. I wanted to let you know," he said after an awkward exchange of pleasantries, "that I've decided to sell the Victorian. Though I had prepared myself for this possibility, the news still struck with surprising force." "I see. Have you found a buyer?" "Not yet. It goes on the market next week." He paused. "I know this is probably a strange question, but would you be interested in handling the staging? You know the house better than anyone, and your restoration consulting business has been getting great reviews." The request was indeed strange, being asked to prepare my former home for someone else to buy. Yet as I considered it, I recognized the opportunity it presented. A chance for closure, for proof that I could view the Victorian as simply another project rather than the embodiment of lost dreams. "I'll do it," I found myself saying. "My fee is $75 per hour, plus expenses for any items needed for staging." "That's fair," Mario agreed, sounding relieved. "When can you start?" "After I close on my new house," I replied, a sense of rightness settling over me as I spoke the words. "My new house. I'm buying a craftsman bungalow in Oakwood." "Congratulations," he said, genuine warmth in his voice. That's really good to hear, Margaret." That evening, as I continued sketching plans for the bungalow, I realized that something fundamental had shifted within me. The Victorian no longer represented everything I had lost. It was simply a beautiful old house that I had once loved, that I could now approach with professional detachment and appreciation for its architectural merits. My future, Kenna's future, lay elsewhere, in the modest bungalow with good bones and unlimited potential. In the business I was building day by day. In the community that had gathered around us in our time of need. The vision forming before me wasn't a replacement for what had been taken, but something entirely new. A life designed with intention, resilience, and hard-won wisdom. A transformation not just of circumstances, but of perspective. As I closed my sketchbook and checked on Kenna one last time before bed, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in months. Tomorrow would bring the closing on the bungalow, the first concrete step toward this new vision. It wouldn't be easy, this rebuilding. But for the first time since receiving Garrett's devastating text, I was genuinely looking forward to the journey ahead. 6 months after Kenna's birth, moving day arrived. My mother's house, which had been our sanctuary during the darkest period of my life, was now filled with boxes as we prepared to move to the craftsman bungalow I had purchased. The moving truck arrived, driven by Gino and 2 of his crew members who had volunteered their Saturday to help. "Consider it a housewarming gift," Gino had insisted when I tried to pay them. By afternoon, the bungalow was filled with boxes and basic furniture. When the moving truck was finally empty, everyone gathered on the front porch, sharing pizza and beer. "A toast," Hannah declared, raising her bottle. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," everyone echoed, and I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. The renovations proved more challenging than anticipated. The electrical system needed complete rewiring, and a previously undiscovered roof leak had caused structural damage. Through it all, I juggled contractor meetings and client consultations while caring for Kenna, whose increasing mobility added complexity to daily life. 3 months into the renovations, I received a letter from Garret with a legal document transferring sole ownership of the remaining proceeds from the Victorian sale to a trust I could access. It was enough to complete the bungalow renovations and establish a college fund for Kenna. "This isn't an attempt to buy forgiveness," he wrote. "It's simply the right thing to do. The house was as much yours as mine, regardless of whose name was on the deed." The additional funds transformed the renovation timeline. With financial pressure eased, I could focus on quality rather than cost. As the bungalow gradually became a home, my business continued to grow. I hired a part-time assistant, freeing more time for design work and for Kenna. By Kenna's first birthday, the main floor renovations were complete. We celebrated in the newly finished backyard, where a deck and play area had replaced overgrown weeds. Garret attended briefly, bringing a wooden rocking horse he had made himself. As he prepared to leave, he paused beside me. "The place looks amazing," he said quietly. "You've created something really special here." Watching him walk away, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The rage that had once consumed me had gradually transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that Garrett's betrayal had ultimately led me to a place of greater strength and clarity. The bungalow was a physical manifestation of that transformation. Every choice reflected not just aesthetic preferences, but lessons learned through hardship. The importance of solid foundations, the value of flexible spaces that could evolve as needs changed, the beauty that could emerge from seeing potential, where others saw only problems. 2 years after receiving Garrett's devastating text, I stood in the attic of the bungalow, now transformed into a serene master suite, and watched the sunrise through the dormer windows. Kenna was still asleep, in her room downstairs, likely to remain so for another hour. So much had changed. The bungalow renovation was complete, each room reflecting both thoughtful design and practical functionality. My business had grown beyond what I had initially imagined possible, and Kenna had blossomed into an energetic, curious toddler whose determination and resilience mirrored my own. Garret remained in our lives, though in a capacity far different from what we had once planned. Our divorce had been finalized a year earlier. He now saw Kenna regularly, having graduated from supervised visits to overnight stays every other weekend. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment of quiet contentment. The betrayal that had once defined my existence had gradually receded, becoming one chapter in a longer story rather than its defining event. That evening, I received an unexpected email from a woman named Maureen Williams with the subject line, "Thank you for your story. I attended your workshop on historic home restoration last month," she wrote. "You briefly mentioned rebuilding your life after your husband sold your home while you were in labor. I wanted to tell you that your words changed my life. I've been stuck in an emotionally abusive marriage for years, afraid to leave because I didn't think I could make it on my own with 2 young children. But hearing how you rebuilt from nothing gave me the courage to finally take that step. We moved out last week. Your pain became purpose. Your story is helping others write new endings to their own." The realization crystallized something I had been feeling intuitively. What had happened to me wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was part of a larger tapestry of human experience, of trust broken and rebuilt, of resilience forged in fire, of new beginnings emerging from painful endings. The next morning, I made a decision. For months, I had been considering expanding my business to include workshops for women in transition, those rebuilding after divorce, career changes, or other major life disruptions. Maureen's email had shifted something within me. If my story could help even one woman find courage, how could I keep it hidden? 3 years to the day after receiving Garrett's text, I stood in the backyard of the bungalow, surrounded by friends and family celebrating Kenna's 3rd birthday. As dusk fell and string lights illuminated the gathering, I found myself in conversation with Bailey. "Do you ever think about the Victorian?" she asked quietly. "Do you miss it?" I considered the question, watching Kenna chase fireflies with her friends. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not in the way you might think. I don't miss the house itself so much as the certainty I had then, the belief that loving something meant it would always be mine. But I've learned that some things can't be taken away," I continued. "The skills I developed, the creative vision, the ability to see potential in what others might overlook." I gestured toward the bungalow, its warm lights glowing against the twilight sky. "All of that is here too, just in a different form." The text that had once shattered my world had become, improbably, the first line of a different story altogether. One of resilience, purpose, and a joy deeper for having known. Its opposite. Not the life I had planned, but one I had built deliberately, mindfully, from the ground up. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.